Hello, everyone. It is 1:59. Look, I'm trying to look good today. I have a little jacket on. And how is everybody? It's nice to see you. It's coming up on 2 o'clock on the West Coast of the United States. Patrick Scott here. Lovely to see you all. So today, and I had to be Dr. Scott earlier this morning. I don't usually wear a jacket, but I went to a provider exposition meeting here in Las Vegas. So just back from Hawaii, and it was a wild ride this time. And so today I'm going to talk about kind of the spectrum, back to our conversation of the intersection of science and spirituality. And today we're going to talk about religion as it has to do with otherworldly beings. Joshua says, I look as though I were in some tropical climate with sun. I've been getting that feedback today and all week that I look tan. I'll take it. You know, I did get some sun. I mean, I wasn't on the beach. I do actually work, and it's kind of fun. So anyway, I'm going to talk about some scenarios, and the thing that the overarching reason for this conversation around otherworldly beings like entities or demons or ghosts or residual energy is I really want to demystify it from a quantum physics perspective, from a chaos theory, string theory perspective, from a quantum mechanics perspective. Not that I'm an expert in any, I'm not certainly not a nuclear physicist, and I realize that I'm bouncing, so I'm going to move the computer to the table so that as I get more and more lively in my dialogue, you don't get sick with me bouncing all over the place. So heads up, beautiful day today. Oh, it's so nice, the weather. All right, so here we go. All right, people. So, um, since humans have been on the planet, there have been spiritual things. There's been legend and myth and lore and scripture. We don't know what's real and what's not real. In my life, I span the spectrum of mental health. I'm a mental health professional, and lately, in the last 20 years or so, I've gotten into past life regression and Huna and spirituality and Buddhism and all that kind of thing. And so I have the great fortune of working with a lot of people, um, and I help people. And this gets controversial, I will say. In many indigenous cultures, Hawaiian being one of them, Aboriginal cultures, Native cultures, tribal cultures, there was a shaman, there was a medicine man, there was a witch doctor, who was not the chief, by the way. The chief was the chief, the royalty was the royalty. And then, in addition to the royalty, there was often an advisor, a witch doctor, a shaman. In the Hawaiian tradition, we called it a kahuna, and that there was a kahunas of all types, right? There were kahunas of hut building and boat building, and the kahuna of herbal medicine, the kahuna of predictions, and the particular lineage in which I'm in practicing was called La'aokehea, which means the one who calls the energy. And so our particular lineage, going back to many generations, were the advisors to the king, and the ones that would advise him about the weather and advise him about when to go into battle and things like that. Now, circuitous route to start talking about in cultures everywhere, the Catholic Church. Now, I'm going to talk today about demons. I'm going to talk about exorcisms. I'm going to talk about ghosts. I'm not going to talk about zombies. I don't know about zombies. I don't think zombies really exist. Sorry. And so I don't think werewolves exist. I don't think vampires exist. Sorry. I love them. I love the Twilight series. I saw a recent Thai uh, feature, and I'm all about the Asian cinema. It's a weird idiosyncrasy of mine. And there was a series, a 12 episode series called My Golden Blood, and it was a modern day Bangkok vampire movie. Loved it. I'm not talking about that. So we're going to separate fact from fiction. We're going to separate Hollywood or Bollywood or Bangkok Wood or whoever it is from my experience clinically of people who believe in ghosts and goblins. I don't know what a goblin is. I don't actually know what a goblin is. So let's just say ghosts, residual energy. I'm going to talk about a lot of different examples. And I'm in my jacket. I am a legitimate healthcare professional. I have licenses. I have board certifications. I have a lot of letters behind my name. And I get to talk about it because I have experience working with people. Now, there is one school of thought that says, well, those are just delusions, they're just hallucinations. And that when somebody thinks that they have a ghost, or they think they see orbs, or they talk to Aunt Tilly from the other side, or they feel like they got slimed at Costco, that that's just a delusion or a hallucination, and that there's no basis in reality or fact. And I'm going to say that's not been my experience. I have my own experiences. Now, I work with a good many people who declare to me they wish they were as sensitive to energy as I am. And I will tell them, as I did my colleagues last week in Hawaii, don't wish for that, because, for those of you out there, and I know you, are very sensitive to energy, and you aren't going to go to the EDC. You're not going to go to the Tao nightclub in Las Vegas. You're not going to go to Mardi Gras or Carnival. You're not going to go to a Costco on a Saturday, or Whole Foods, where the people are angry because they just need to eat more. I'm joking. I would say the people in Whole Foods, particularly at the meat counter, are so angry because they need to have a sandwich. They're starving. That's my joke. And I'm going to infuse humor. And my intention today for you is to demystify and to take some of the fear out of some of this stuff. And I will use some clinical examples very recently that happened in the last couple of weeks. All right. So since humans began, there have been more years of tribal medicine. If you think about it, psychology as we've come to know it is only 100, maybe 120 years old. Freud was doing what Freud was doing in Vienna, Austria, uh, early 20th century, 1890 to 1920, right? Carl Jung picked up, Anna Freud picked up, Adler, Rogers, all those theorists. We have a discipline called psychology. Social work started with the Poor Law, English Poor Law of 1604. There's always been an interest in social work and helping others, marriage and family therapy, licensed professional counseling, addictions counseling are all offshoots of psychiatry, psychology, and behavioral health disciplines. Now, I'm going to make a distinction here between schizophrenia, or a hallucinatory, disorganized thought system with delusions and fixed delusional systems, because that does exist, versus a spiritual awakening, an epiphany, a near-death experience, the thinking that there's a ghost or an energy in a particular place. And we're going to talk today, and the time I have, in 50 minutes or so, about those distinctions, because here at Heads Up, that's what we do. We see people with schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia is a thought disorder characterized by disorganized thought processes, by hallucinations, by delusions, often concrete thinking, and it is treated with medication, pretty powerful medication. And it usually happens late teens, early 20s. It is an inherited condition. It is a chronic condition. It is not curable. It is manageable. And so a lot of what we do here at Heads Up is someone who is schizophrenic comes in. Oftentimes, they won't come in until a family member brings them, or they come to the attention of the authorities. They're often homeless. They've often been estranged or ostracized from their families of origin. They often attempt in their late teen years to use drugs and alcohol to medicate the hallucinations, the fears, the paranoia, the delusions, and so on. That is a clinically diagnosable thing that we see. Now, you will hear schizophrenic people who are paranoid say that they believe that they are Jesus or that they are God or that they are being talked to by certain things. And so the question comes, so what's the distinction between someone who believes they're talking to their dead relative on the other side who has passed or someone who's schizophrenic? Schizophrenia has a very, very distinct set of symptoms. And if you're in the business, you know what it is. Now, also statistically noted is that the percentage of the population of schizophrenia is very small. Less than 1% of the population, of any given population, is going to be schizophrenic. And so these are not commonly occurring disorders. You're not going to walk around. Now, these will be the people you'll see on the street shaking their fist at God with a shopping cart, usually also using substances, usually also homeless, usually also smelly, usually also not willing to go to a shelter, not willing to get help. Um, Interestingly, and I'll give you a clinical example. A few years ago, a young man came in. He was 27, Latino, and he declared that he was Jesus, and he really believed that he was Jesus. Now, his family brought him in, very large Hispanic family here in Las Vegas, and and this was at least a decade ago. So, and I feel safe talking about him. I'm not going to use his name for privacy and confidentiality reasons, but he came in and clearly schizophrenic. Now, prior to seeing me, he had been addicted to meth. He had been homeless. He had been in jail. He'd been in prison. He would go into uh, places of business and just steal things to eat to survive on the street. It came to the noticing of the authorities, and ultimately he went to what we have here in Las Vegas called mental health court. He had been through the system. It was clear that this young man was disabled. He was not. He did not fire on all cylinders, as we said. So his family, very lovely, brought him in. I saw him. And he and I developed a rapport. Now, I clearly needed to have him take medication right away. And then we got to manage how he handled the medication, how compliant he was. And his fixed delusional system was that he was actually Jesus. And he kind of looked like Jesus, Latin Jesus, goatee, long hair, robes, the whole thing. This is not, now, hear me loud and clear. I know he's not Jesus, right? He is clearly disabled. He's clearly disordered. He clearly has a paranoid schizophrenia. Funny joke, I would say, do you go to church? And Catholic family, he'd say, oh, no, 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 God doesn't live there. He would be very paranoid about church. He wouldn't go to church. He would leave the house. And so we got him started on medication. Then our job really was to educate the family on the chronicity of the disorder, right? This is not something that's curable. A lot of people believe, gee, I took an antidepressant once, I should be cured. Gee, I took an antipsychotic once, I should be cured. And I ate kale once, and I did yoga once, I worked out once. You all know that sometimes medications like blood pressure medicine or thyroid medicine, you take it. Insulin, diabetics have to take insulin for the rest of their life. And so there was a lot of education with the family before they would allow him to move back into the house. So we did all that. It took a year. And now, I mean, I haven't seen him in years now, but he would see me every week. And now understand that given his disorder, well medicated, the delusion never went away. He would just learn how to manage it. He would come into our sessions and he would say to me, you're the only person I can actually talk freely about talking to God and being the son of God. And I would say, great, let's do that. And we would talk that way. And he never came, he didn't drive. He never came to sessions without a family member. They didn't come into session every time. They did for the first 6 months because he didn't trust me. But once we developed rapport and he knew that he was safe. Now, that is a psychiatric disorder. All right. Let me flip it to something else. So another woman came into the clinic, a 68, 9-year-old female, and she had been referred by a local psychiatry office for psychotherapy for grief. Actually, her mother had passed away. She came in and I saw her and I said hello, and you could tell she was upset. And I said, "What's going on?" She says, "Well, my mom passed a few weeks ago, and I went to see a psychiatrist, thinking I was going crazy, because I believe my mother's coming to me in dreams, and I believe my mother is. I can feel my mother's presence, and I was thinking that I was crazy." And I went to a psychiatrist, and I don't know who the psychiatrist was, but he basically says, "Yeah, that is crazy. You need to go to see Dr. Scott." Heads up. So this woman was very intact, had lived her entire life with no mental health issues. She did not qualify for anything as far as I was concerned other than normal bereavement, grieving, some depression, depressive symptoms that would be consistent with having just lost her mother. Her mother was in her 90s and had lived a good life, and her issue was that she felt her mother's presence. She felt she had dreams, that her mother was coming to her in dreams. Now, who am I to say that her mother's not coming to her, that the presence of her mother's not around her, that she's not having dreams? Now, from a purely Western clinical perspective, I could say, well, that's a delusion, or that's a hallucination, or she's hallucinating. I don't know that. Western medicine would dictate that, yeah, that's probably a delusion. Mom's dead. Now, depending on where you fall out on the spiritual sciencey spectrum, and I'm going to tell one on myself, I totally believe that people come to us after they die. I believe, and I'll use my own example in a moment. So we talked about it. It's not my place to say, honey, you're crazy. Your mom's dead. Get over it. That would be cruel. And that she was coming in dreams. The unconscious mind, we know, is the repository for the processing of trauma. Her mom just died. Give me a break. It doesn't cost me or anyone anything to say, here's a place where you can talk about your mom. And so I just said, let's talk about your mom. And I saw her for about 6 months, and she resolved and forgave her mom for dying, which is what people do. And her mom no longer came to her. And I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that I know that it wasn't the mom and that it was a delusion or a hallucination. I don't know. I don't know enough. I'm going to err on the side of the mom. She felt her mom's presence. She felt her mom's energy. Nothing wrong with that. I will use my own example. I have two. Now, I've also, as you know, have had a couple near-death experiences, and I have been on the other side. And I believe that there is another side. I believe there's a vibrational frequency where our soul goes after it leaves the body, that our soul never dies. This is my belief system now. You don't have to agree with it. It's well documented in literature, but I have my own experiences, and that's all I've got. And I don't need you to believe me. So my mom passed away in 1984. She died of a heart attack very abruptly. And I can say for the large part of my adult life, she never came to me. I never felt a connection. Other people, I would go to psychics and they would say that my mother was around me, but I quite honestly would never feel her and never heard her talk to me. I had these two old cats that I had for 25 years. And my mom had a very distinctive voice. She smoked cigarettes her entire life and she drank bourbon, loved her bourbon, loved her cigarettes. And she had this real gravelly voice, very distinctive, very, very low voice. And my cats were getting older. And now this is my experience. You can say, well, God, he's hallucinating. He's completely delusional. And I will own it. And I don't qualify for hospitalization. Sorry. This is my experience. So one morning I wake up. I know that my older kitty, Chloe, she's on her last legs. I just didn't have the heart to put her down. She didn't seem to be in a lot of pain. She was 25 years old, skinny, taking her to the vet. They said, well, we can do things, but why? Do you want to just put her down? But she wasn't suffering. She wasn't in any great pain. I asked the vet, I said, would it be more humane to put her down? He goes, no, she's fine. She's just going to fade away. It's the end of her life. She's had a good life. So one morning I wake up and I'm alone in bed and I hear my mom's voice. Now, you know how you're not fully awake, and in her gravelly voice, honey, your cat's in the backyard. You better get up and get a towel. Go to the linen closet, get a towel, go find your cat," in my mom's crass, gravelly, bourbon-soaked voice with cigarettes. Got my attention. I always did what my mother told me to do. Now, understand, this is, well, 30 plus years after her death. I go to the linen closet, I get a towel, I go to the backyard, I find Chloe. She had gone through the cat door, and she was out under a bush. And apparently, I've learned that cats are animals when they know that they're going to pass away. They go outside and they kind of hide, or they, when they want to get into nature and kind of pass away peacefully. So I found her. She was still alive. She was barely alive. And she whined and moaned a little bit, meowed a little bit. And I picked her up, I wrapped her in the towel, and I brought her back inside and I held her. And she passed away in my arms. And it was really beautiful. I mean, I could feel her stop moving, and I could feel her soul leave her body. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Of course, then I started crying and just couldn't stop crying and bawled my eyes out. And that was my experience of my mother coming to me. And that's just one. And that's the only time. I don't talk to my mother. Now, I have heard by doing readings and channeling that our dead relatives don't come to us because they don't want to aggravate the grieving process. It's not that they want to leave us alone. Well, they do kind of want to leave us alone. And so that was my only experience of my mother. And I don't know, was it real? Did I make it up? Was it a dream? Was I still asleep? I don't know. My sister had lung cancer, stage 4 lung cancer, and I was in the cancer center with her, also an avid smoker. She was 60 years old, walking her down to the smoking lounge in the hospital where she could have a cigarette, lung cancer. And the irony was not lost on me. And we agreed that when she passed, because we knew she was going to pass, as my older sister, that she would come to me and she would let me know that she was okay. So, long story short, she passed on a given day, and I was driving. I didn't know that I was not with her. I was traveling and I was teaching. And I had been in touch with, she was in a nursing home. She had fallen and hit her head, and she had some issues. And the doctor said that, she was not doing well. She may not survive the night. And I was keeping in touch with the doctor and the hospice nurse, and she was in hospice. And he said, that the fateful words, "You might want to get her. She doesn't look like she's going to survive the night. If you would like to be with her in her last moments." And I'm driving down in Ohio, from Lima, Ohio to Dayton, Ohio, to catch a plane. And I hear my sister's voice just as clear as a bell. I'm alone in the car. And in her Minnesota accent, she goes, "Oh, Pat, it's real nice over here. Oh, I wouldn't, if I knew it was so nice over here, I wouldn't have been so scared. It's really, really nice. So beautiful." And she said not 30 seconds of those kinds of words. And that was it. And that was the only time I've ever spoken to or heard from my sister. But she promised she would let me know she was okay, and she did. And when I recount the voicemail from the doctor and my niece who was there with her, um, it wasn't a few minutes after her actual death that those words came through. And so I tell you these stories because I want to make a distinction between, are we crazy? Am I crazy? I know what I heard. You can't mistake those voices, right? Was it wishful thinking? Maybe. Was it a hallucination? Maybe. I was sober. I wasn't under the influence of any drugs, a pretty straightforward kind of a guy. Now, 20, 30 years ago, I wrote all of this stuff off as coincidence and as hallucination, as delusion. Now, let's move. So those are some experiences, right? If you have ever been somewhere where you feel energy, or you feel negativity, or you have, now when I do my anecdotal research, by the way, meaning I ask groups, and I'm teaching a psychic development class here in a couple of weeks called STFU, which is sold out, by the way. STFU sold out, San Diego. Who knew? A lot of people are interested in this stuff. And that class is about enhancing your intuitive abilities. And we do it all over the country, all over the world, actually. I've done it in Japan. And so look for it. If you're really interested in this stuff and really interested in honing your intuitive abilities and kind of capitalizing on some of those hunches and suspicions that you have, that's a great class. Where was I going? Are we crazy? We're all crazy. Oh, so if you've ever been someplace and you have felt the energy, right? I've told you the story about my experience in the Tower of London 25 years ago. I don't do panic. I'm not a panicky person. I'm a lot of things, but I don't do panic attacks. And I was in the Tower of London looking at the suit of armor of Henry VIII. Had a panic attack, had to get out of there. Don't know why. And found out later in past life regression with Brian Weiss that I had been beheaded at the Tower of London. Now, I'm offering you these anecdotal tidbits because I want you to understand if you're watching me and you follow me, I don't want you to be freaked out because I have been freaked out by my experiences. I don't want you to be freaked out. I want you to be curious. I want you to go, oh, gee, that's interesting. I had that dream, or gee, that's interesting. I had that feeling, or gee, that interesting. I got really, uh, I had this weird feeling all of a sudden. And rather than fear it and move away from it, I'd like you to lean into it. Um, Told the story before. I'm going to tell it again because there's new developments. So my partner's name is Rick. Together 25 years. He's way more psychic than I am, and we went to a restaurant in St. Paul, Minnesota, and you can look it up because it's public, and they have a Facebook page now. And it's an old Victorian house, and some of you have heard me tell this story. So we go to. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's the summer. It's very hot outside. We walk in, and Rick immediately turns to me and he shivers. He goes, "It's freezing at this vestibule." And he looks at me. He goes, "What is that?" And then he looks at me and he goes, "Are you going to handle that? Are you going to handle that?" Meaning there's an energy. And I said, "What are you feeling?" I felt it. And he said, "Third floor, front of the house, female energy, suicide." And he just went down. I said, "Okay." And then so we got permission to go up to the third floor. Front of the house is a big picture window. And he read it, man. He said, female, domestic, broken heart, suicided, that kind of thing. We went down to the bar, which is we were going there for a drink. And in the inside of the menu, as they often have in these historical places, was the story. 1888, Mr. Forepaugh is a railroad baron. He was having an affair with the domestic housemaid, Molly. Mrs. Forepaugh found out about the torrid affair and said that he needed to break it off with Molly while they were back east on a business trip. He sent word to Molly via like cable or telegram or whatever it was in those days, Pony Express, I don't know, and said, we have to break up. We can't continue this. Molly was so forlorn and so upset that she put bed sheets together and hung herself outside the front window. And that was the front page of the St. Paul Pioneer Press newspaper that next morning because it was very, very public and it was very, obviously she did it. And Molly has been there apparently ever since. And there's lots of stories about hauntings and noises at night and people seeing her and hundreds and hundreds of stories. Now, I felt her. Now he said, "Can you get rid of her?" I said, "It's not. I don't have permission. It's not my ghost, not my circus, not my monkeys. I am not here to assist her to get to the other side. It's not my job." And so this was pre-COVID. COVID happened. The restaurant closed, and we only went that one time. We, coexisted with Molly, and she was fine. So 5 years go by. The restaurant reopens just a couple years ago. And he says one day, "Can we go to Four Paws and see if Molly's still there?" So we go. Same kind of a scenario. We're not. It's an expensive, fancy restaurant, so we didn't want to commit to a big expensive dinner. So we were just going to go to the bar, have a drink, and just check it out, see if Molly's still there. We walk in the vestibule, cold air, colder than it should be, and walked up. Asked permission if we could walk upstairs. They had renovated the house, painted. Actually made it look a whole lot more like the Addams Family house, black, and I think they were capitalizing on the haunting. And Molly was still there. Molly was still there, not hurting anybody, but just kind of a presence. And if you were sensitive to energy, you could feel her. Well, now this week, people, Four Paws, in honor of Halloween, is having, and I wish I had my phone, I could pull it up. I tried to save a screenshot of it. They are selling a haunted evening with Molly, $150 a person, sold out the first night, dinner. 5-course meal with Molly. I think it's great. So, and then they talk about, and they have a historian coming in to talk about the history, and $150 a person. Sold out. They added a second night. Molly is living her best life. Now, the question then to me is Molly's soul lost? Is Molly lost? What is Molly? Is there such thing as ghosts? What is that all about anyway? Now, Molly's soul is fine. Souls exist forever and all time. We don't die. We incarnate in different bodies, as the theory goes. You've heard me talk about that in many other videos, right? So Molly's energy is a residual energy because of the intensity of her death and because of the trauma. It has left an imprint, an energetic imprint in that area, and that those people who are sensitive to energy can pick that up. What I think is great is rather than close and say, we've got a haunted house here, um, we can't do business because Molly's here and she's getting in the way of the food or something. It's it's a marketing thing, and it's so cool, and it's at $150 a person. I'm sorry, I think it's great. Molly lives on, and the question is, that what would it take to get her to go to the other side or to dissolve that? And there are lots of people that work in paranormal. If you follow Zach Baggins, or if you follow, I mean, Ghostbusters, which is fictional, but there are people who do that, and they in the promo for the an evening with Molly, they talk about all the Ghostbusters. They don't call them Ghostbusters, but the paranormal investigators they have had come out to Forepaws and have their devices and their EMF device, whatever it is, that have recorded things, and they've got things on video of her, and I don't need you to believe it. It happens, And my point is, but don't be afraid of it. Just she can't hurt you. She's just a disembodied thought form that has left some residual energy, and so on. And so then, are we crazy? Those of us that kind of get into that, are we crazy? Now, I'm into all the alien abductions. I'm into all the ancient alien stuff. I'm into all the pyramid stuff. Oh my God, the pyramid stuff lately, the archaeology stuff of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, on and on and on. I am fascinated by the idea of what we're uncovering historically around ancient technologies. And now there's a theory that the Big Pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza, on the Giza Plateau of Cheops, it was some sort of a transmitter or some sort of an energy source. It wasn't even a tomb. And it doesn't cost us anything to have fun with it. It doesn't cost us anything to consider, like, what is that? Like, what if that's remotely valid? What if it wasn't a tomb? And all the stuff about how did they build those things? There's all the stuff about, and I forget the numbers, 60 ton, 80 ton, 150 ton slabs of granite that were, put 350 feet up in the air with exact precision, who did that? How did that? And they're finding stones that have machine markings, or some of the Egyptian statues with the perfect symmetry. And the stone they're using is extremely hard. I forget the type of stone that they were talking about. It's like almost diamond-like. It's so hard, and that we don't even have the technology now to machine that stone with the technology that we have, and that some organization, it may have been Mythbusters, tried to recreate a pyramid, a small pyramid, a tiny pyramid, with cranes and all what we have now, and had a really hard time doing it. And so I'm fascinated. So my challenge to you is to be curious. Don't be afraid of it. If you are sensitive to energy and you find this stuff remotely interesting, explore it. There's so much information out there. It's just really great. And now, to separate fact from fiction, yeah, I'm going to talk about it. So I just did a Huna class. Now, understand that I teach Hawaiian spirituality. I teach the shamanistic tradition of the ancient Hawaiians. And they, the wisdom of the kahunas. We don't call them kahunas anymore. But these were the priests, these were the shamans that would do healing. And one of the healings that they would do oftentimes had to do with demonic possession. And again, there's a Hollywood version of like The Exorcist, and I know that there's lots of The Conjuring and other kinds of things. And Hollywood has done a great job of scaring us half to death with this stuff. And this kind of thing happens. And I've had my own experiences with clients that come in that, and understand in indigenous cultures, in many Latin American cultures, it's more acceptable to see a shaman than it is to see a doctor. And so, I had one lady come in and she was having these anger management episodes, these blackouts where she would destroy property and become enraged and have no memory of it. It was almost like a seizure, but it was just rage. Her eyes would get black and she would just lose it and all that kind of stuff. Well, she was court ordered, referred to me for anger management counseling. And believe it or not, I mean, she had an entity, in her. And you can say that I'm crazy and you can say that, but, it was just like Hollywood. And I helped her release it. She had no memory of our session. It was hypnosis. And where this stuff resides in the unconscious mind, in the sacred texts of the Matrix, Morpheus, is talking to Neo, and Neo is not buying it. And if you haven't watched The Matrix, it's kind of cool, but it's an older film now, film series, and it's about a dystopian future where machines kind of run the world and humans are subjugated as slaves. And it's a very 1984 George Orwell kind of idea, a little bit more modern day. And Morpheus, I can't remember the name of the actor. I want to say Samuel L. Jackson, but it wasn't. It was It wasn't Morgan Freeman. Of course, I can't remember the name of the actor. Lawrence Fishburne, maybe. Um, Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, is saying, it was Lawrence Fishburne. Thank you, Joshua. Uh, Neo's basically saying, well, what if I don't believe in any of this stuff? I just don't believe it. And you can say that. I just don't believe in any of that stuff. And if you don't believe it, you get to have your beliefs. I'm not trying to convince you to believe any of this stuff. But what Morpheus says is, fortunately, my beliefs don't require you to. And that's what I'll say to you guys is, I have my experiences, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I believe. If I'm in a helping profession and someone comes in, this guy comes in and thinks he's Jesus. Now, that was a schizophrenia process. Other lady comes in with anger management. Her family, Latin American family, grandma believes she was possessed. We did a procedure, a hypnotic procedure, where she almost vomited green slime and exorcised it, and I used Hawaiian spiritual techniques to do that. I have been referred exorcisms and depossessions by the Catholic Church here in Las Vegas. Apparently, the Las Vegas Archdiocese does not have an exorcist. And if you want an exorcist, it's going to take you a couple of years to go to LA or whatever it is. Now, I can't prove that. And please don't fact check me. Don't call the Las Vegas Archdiocese. It's not, it's, kind of save your time and energy. So this Huna, just a couple of weeks ago, I was teaching a class, and there was a young woman in the class, and we were talking about things like this, and all of a sudden she started making noises and she lost consciousness. And I'm teaching the class, and Josh says that he just called the church, and I'm legit. Apparently they know who I am. I'm the real deal. And so she started having what looked to me to be, she was choking. She was making noise. She was moaning. Her eyes were fluttering. And I walked over and I asked her from stage, is she okay? She was sitting next to one of my students, and she was sweating profusely and having some sort of an episode of some sort, medical or otherwise. So I walked over to her, and she started dry heaving, like she was going to vomit. And this is on the big island of Hawaii. The nearest hospital is 90 minutes away or by a helicopter to Honolulu. And I am CPR trained and I am a medical professional, and we had nurses in the room, and, we're going to do what we can. And I'm going to assess whether or not she needs to go to the hospital. And In a nutshell, she was releasing some sort of an entity, and the class watched me do it. I did some chanting, I did some symbols, I did some energy work, and she released this big thing. Now, people who saw energy could see this thing, and I got an intuitive hit as to what it was, and it was old, and as she has done work, it was no her. She was no longer a hospitable host. Now, um, I had 45 people witness it, and so for them, and they were level 3 students at Huna, they witnessed it, and she's fine. She was exhausted, as was I. It took about 30 minutes to have this thing go, and, it was an interesting experience. It terrified the people in the class because she was making noises not compatible with this. She was very small, very diminutive, very cute, very sweet, and she was making growling, guttural, hacking noises, dry heaving noises, and moaning. And her was sweating profusely, and I worked with her for about a half an hour, and she released this thing that I sent back to source, and that is part of the Huna tradition. It is not weird. It's not interesting. It's not notable. It's part of the deal. You do spiritual work, and those of you energy workers out there, you see orbs, you take video. I have one student who has it's I don't know that that's a ring, that ring camera thing outside the doorway. Well, she has in her office has like a video camera set up, and man, she's a medium and a psychic, and she works in the other realms, and she's very intuitive, and I love it when she sends me videos of some of the activity of the orbs and that kind of thing. And you can um, watch all this stuff online and see it and understand that, whether you believe it or not, or you like it or not, if you're not attracted to it, then don't bother. But that cameras and the technology now is picking up things. There was one that I saw recently where it was in a hospice, and there was a camera trained on a patient who was actively dying, as they say, and they filmed the soul leaving the body, and it was really interesting. And it was, you could see it, and it was a really clear. But I mean, it was very hazy, and then orbs and that kind of. You could see orbs coming in. Orbs meaning they look like bubbles, like big bubbles, though. Not little tiny bubbles, but like big bubbles coming in, and the energy, and you can see the soul leaving the body, and it's all on film. And you can say, well, that's doctored, and that's AI, and that, well, whatever. Okay, but if you don't believe it, then you don't believe it. Then don't look at it. I'm just excited because I think this is becoming a lot more mainstream, and it's not so spooky or scary. Now, after the depossession with this lady in the class, had to do some cleanup. There were people who were just officially freaked the F out by it, and it took a few days for us to kind of calm down. The very next day, a different teacher had a different student with another activity, another depossession that came up. And it's not, just so you know, nobody's head is spun around on their shoulders. I thought this lady was going to vomit green slime because she was dry heaving, but she didn't. Somebody went and got a wastebasket in case she didn't need to throw up. But there are physiologies that do happen, and this does happen, and it does exist. And the question becomes then how and what do you do with all that? And so, part of the Huna tradition is having tools to protect yourself, not be afraid, because these things feed on anger and fear, and they will reside in you. And now, not surprisingly, and I don't know whether it's placebo, this particular Huna saw after those two experiences, many students all of a sudden thought that they were feeling like they were not possessed so much, but that they had entities, or there's some, and they were freaked out that they had been slimed or that kind of thing. So let's talk one more before we conclude today about being slimed. Have you ever gone to a place and you instantly got sick? Sick to your stomach, a headache, nausea, dizziness, couldn't catch your breath, shortness of breath. You were otherwise normal. You went into this environment, and all of a sudden you started having some physical symptoms. And that could be the burrito you had for lunch, it could be the Bloody Mary you had for brunch, or you could have picked up some energies. Now, remember, on the spectrum of energies, we're surrounded by energies all the time. You've heard me talk about gamma radiation, the Schumann resonance, the astrology, the cosmology, gravity, not my friend right now. So we live in these physical bodies. We're on the earth. We have open limbic systems. We influence each other. If you've ever walked into a room and you could feel the tension was so thick that you could cut it with a knife, if you have met somebody and you instantly didn't like them and you didn't know them, and so on. And so I want to demystify this and help you understand that whether you like it or not, and it's not to be paranoid, it's not to run around and go, oh, lions and tigers and bears, oh my, I'm so scared, but to understand and to be inquisitive and curious about what you're doing. I, as I've gotten older and I do more energy work, need more sleep. I need more time alone. I don't do well with a lot of socializing. I don't do well with crowds anymore as much. Now, you could say, well, that's a limiting belief or a limiting decision. It's a choice right now. I don't go to Costco on a Saturday. Sorry. I'm just not going to do that to myself. I don't go to Trader Joe's on a Saturday. I'm not going to do that to myself. I'm not going to go to the Electronic Daisy Carnival here in Las Vegas. I'm not going to go to the Tao nightclub on a Saturday or a Sunday clubbing. Um, it just doesn't sound like my idea of fun. I went to the Minnesota State Fair a few years ago with my family, and 250,000 of my closest friends, crowds, and I just didn't enjoy myself. It was too much energy, and so I know I'm speaking to the choir here, that many of you, but please don't be ashamed. Don't. I work with people all day. I talk all day. I listen all day. My friends and family understand that by about 7 o'clock at night, I'm done. I'm done talking. I'm done listening. I love you. I'm not, and I'm introverted, and you get to decide whether you're introverted or extroverted and how you recharge. I recharge alone. And I'm just noticing the older I get, need more time alone. And if you are on a spiritual path, you may need more time alone. Nothing wrong with that. But you need to negotiate with your family and your friends to not take it personally. You know, um, my family and friends understand it. Going over to my daughter's house tonight for dinner and drinks, and and I'm letting them see the grandkids. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Absolutely. That's the only thing I'm doing this week. I'm not out every night. And again, I think you can relate if you're in a helping profession, you work with people. I love people. I'm of service to people. And there's a time when I want to get away from people, where I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want to listen anymore. I want to go in nature and just shut up. I created this class, it's really funny. It used to be called psychic development. And the question was, well, you know, as you've come up and as you become more intuitive in your travels, what's the most notable feature? Like, if you could leave us with one tidbit, one kernel or seedling of wisdom in helping us be more aware, be more sensitive, awaken to our intuitive and psychic abilities, it would be to shut up. And so after a couple of years, the feedback was, psychic development, it's okay. It's just kind of a boring title. It's a boring title. And so I changed the title to STFU, which means exactly what you think it does. Is shut the F up, because all roads lead to STFU. If you are meditating, if you are chanting, if you are learning symbology or Reiki or meditation or hypnosis or anything at all, our conscious mind is really very limited, in its ability to really help us. And that there's way more wisdom and access to the Akashic records, to the wisdom of the dearly departed, to the wisdom of the ages, to, energies that we don't consciously understand, by getting quiet and listening. And so I'll leave you with the 4 steps to psychic development. Number 1 is release work. I'm just so blessed to have tools to do release work. Now, whether you use, Hawaiian tools or other kinds of tools to let go of baggage, letting go of baggage and letting go of negative emotions and limiting beliefs and limiting decisions and core wounds and karmic patterns and internal conflicts is really important. Forgiveness, really important. Number 2, meditation, getting quiet, preferably getting quiet in nature. I am increasingly drawn to nature and to connecting with the elements. and getting out of the technology and getting, shutting the computer and putting my phone away. I am doing my very best. If you know me, um, you'll learn that I get up early in the morning and I don't look at my phone. It frustrates some people. I don't actually look at my phone for 3 or 4 hours in the morning because there's stuff in there, important stuff, triggering stuff. So try it. Meditation, getting quiet, lots of apps. We have a lot of downloads that are free. Shut up. Just sit, be quiet. Now, some of you are going to need to do the driving meditation or the walking meditation or the walking the dog meditation or the treadmill meditation or whatever you need to do. But as an experiment, I challenge you. How about if you start the day with some lemon water, you stretch, you don't look at your phone for an hour, and you haven't slept with your phone, and you haven't put your phone next to your bedside table. Now, I know you're going to say, well, that's my alarm clock. You can hear your alarm in the other room. You can put the charger in the other room. This is just kind of things I've tried. So I'm trying to do that. I'm notoriously sleeping with YouTube, sleeping with my computer, sleeping with my phone, constantly looking at information, and try that on for size. So number 2 is meditation. Number 3 is calibration, learning how to get a yes or no answer from your universe, not your opinion, not your ego, but we use pendulum, we use applied kinesiology, which is basically muscle testing. And so, if some of you are just so intuitive that you can learn and understand a yes, no, body show me yes, body show me no. There's a whole field of study there that we teach in STFU. And then finally, number 4, to listen. Instead of talking so much, just listen. Listen to your family, listen to your children, listen to each other, listen to the sounds of the universe. Listen to the wisdom that's emanating from your life. Your gut feelings usually have more wisdom. And if you've ever gone against your gut feelings, you know what I'm talking about. So Josh says some good references as a result of this talk today is The Field by Lynn McTaggart or The Dancing Wu Li Masters by Gary Zukav, great academic studies into spirituality and physics. So I think that's enough for today. So that's the ghosts and goblins and things about entities and that distinction between that and schizophrenia. So hope you have a great day, have a great weekend, and we'll talk next week.